Hey y'all, I'm Ashley with Girls Growing with God. Girls Growing with God is currently an online ministry for women that focuses on teaching the Word of God. We also focus on strengthening our faith, straightening our walk, and solidifying our submission to Christ so that we can be the women of God that He has called and created us to be. We do have a Bible study that we just started on January 1st. It is a 52-week, year-long Bible study in which we are committed to reading the entire Bible from front to back, Genesis to Revelations, through this year of 2023. So if you are already in the group, already a part of the group, already a part of the Bible study, hey girl, I am so glad that you are a part of this group and watching this video. And if you are not a part of the group yet, but you want to be, you still have time. You can still join. I put the link down in the description for you to be able to join the group. You'll just have to catch up to the chapters that we are currently on, but it's okay because we're still within the first book of the Bible. So you can join. We would love to have you. The group is full of amazing, dope women from all around the world, literally, who are committed to growing in Christ and who are also just very supportive and loving and kind and just, fellowshipping, and there's connections being made in the group and all types of stuff. So it's just a really dope place. But the most important thing is everybody in there is committed to growing their relationship with the Lord, regardless of where you at now in your relationship with Christ, regardless of how long you've been saved. If you still just thinking about wanting to get saved, but you don't even know where to start, join a group. There's a place for you. So with the Bible study, basically we just read a few chapters of the Bible a day in your own personal time. A lot of discussions and personal reflections take place in the group based on what you've read. And then at the end of the week, every single Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we meet right here on Facebook Live to do our discussion about what was read during that week. And it's just a good time. We have, prayer and just, however the Lord leads that conversation, that's what we do. But then also, in addition to what we read on a daily basis, I am here to do a recap video basically of each day's readings. So what I'm going to do today is do a recap of week 1, day 4, which is Genesis chapters 13, 14, and 15. So here we go. And I really am going to try to make this under 30 minutes. I think I can do it. All right, so Genesis 13, Genesis chapter 13 is about Abram and Lot separating, right? And so this is right after Abram and his wife were sent out of Egypt because Abram and his wife Sarai lied about her being his sister instead of his wife. So Pharaoh, basically they ended up finding out, Pharaoh kicked them out of Egypt. So Genesis chapter 13, it starts off by saying Abram went up from Egypt to Negev. That's how I pronounce it. I don't know. He, his wife, all that he had, and Lot. Lot is Abram's nephew, right? It says that Abram was very rich, basically in livestock, silver, and gold. So Abram basically was a very wealthy man. And it just basically shares kind of his journey of how he traveled to Negev from Egypt. And then it goes on to explain that Lot also had flocks, herds, and tents. So both of them together, they had so many possessions, right? They were so wealthy, and their possessions was too much for them to both stay in the land together. So it says that the land was not able to support them as long as they stayed together, for they had so many possessions that they could not stay together. And so basically Abram's herdsmen and Lot's herdsmen started arguing with each other pretty much over the land. And so Abram was basically like, look, we family, it's no need in us arguing over this land and things like that. Look, Lot, I'll give you first dibs. Whatever, let's just split. I'll take half, you take half, whatever direction you want to go in. If you want to go east and get that whole part of the land, you can have it, and then I'll just take west. If you choose west, no problem. I'll just take east. But I just want to have peace because you're my nephew. I love you, and we ain't no sense in us beefing over this land, pretty much. That's pretty much how the conversation went. So it says that Lot looked and saw the entire Jordan Valley as far as Zoar, and was well watered everywhere like the Lord's garden in the land of Egypt. This was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, which is something that will come up in one of the later chapters. So it says, so Lot chose the entire Jordan Valley for himself. So Lot went east and Abraham went west. They separated from each other. And it says that Abram, his name was not changed to Abraham yet. Abram lived in the land of Canaan, but Lot lived in the cities of the valley and set up his tent near Sodom. Now, Sodom is a land that God eventually destroyed. Verse 13 says, now the men of Sodom were evil, sinning greatly against the Lord. So Sodom was a place that was a place that was filled with people who were full of sin, and God was not pleased, right? So this is the place that Lot ended up going to, but he didn't know that the Lord would eventually destroy it, right? So we'll get to that point. But so in verse 14, it says, after Lot had separated from him, the Lord said to Abram, look from the place where you are, look north, south, east, and west, for I will give you your offspring forever, all the land that you see. I will make your offspring like dust of the earth. So if anyone can count the dust on the earth, then your offspring should be counted. Get up and walk around, basically check the land out. I'm giving you all this, and your descendants, the descendants that I'm going to give to you, that are going to be birthed through you, you're not even going to be able to count them. This was God's blessing and promise to Abraham, right? But Abraham, of course, did not know this when he chose to go the opposite way of Lot. Abram was just being humble. He was being what I believe was integral to his nephew, just saying, hey, you take this, I'll take that, no biggie. And then we see how God moved on his behalf. So it says, so Abram moved his tent and went to live near the oaks of Mamre at Hebron, where he built an altar to the Lord. So that's the end of verse 13. One of the takeaways that I get from chapter 13 is I see Abram's humility in this chapter. And I think that humility is very important. Where I see Abram's humility is that the fact that Abram is a very wealthy man, right? It says he's rich, he has livestock, he has silver and gold. He pretty much got it all and can pretty much do whatever he wanted to. He can afford whatever he wanted to, is how I take that, right? But for him, and it seems like Lot was pretty well off himself, right? But I believe that Abram could have easily chosen the Jordan Valley, which looked to be, the better choice, which looked to be so vast and just filled with nothing but opportunity and all of this stuff, right? So I believe that that's why Lot chose the east, because it says in verse 10, Lot looked and saw that the entire Jordan Valley was well watered everywhere and things like that. So it looked like it was the better choice, right? Little did he know what city he was going to be camped near, right? But I believe that Abram, in his ability, and in his capacity to choose the better of the two options, or what appeared to be the better of the two options, he gave his nephew the choice to choose whatever he wanted. And Abraham just like, I'll just take whatever you don't choose. It's no big deal. I'll be good, pretty much. And I believe that was because of Abram's faith and his trust in the Lord. I truly believe that. So if I take away anything from that, I look at Abram's humility and his respect for his family and his love for his family, because he didn't want to argue a lot. He didn't want any dissension between him and Lot. He just wanted peace. And so the respect for his family when he could have done anything that he wanted to. And then B, just his willingness to, prefer somebody else over him, or to prioritize somebody else's wants, needs, or desires over his own. Not to his detriment, because it didn't necessarily hurt him either way. But sometimes we be like, well, I want first dibs, let me scope it out first, and let me choose the best one, and then I'm gonna give you the leftovers. Pretty much that's how a lot of us do in whatever situation. And so I think that the takeaway from that is just the humility, the respect level. And just because I believe he was able to make whatever decision he wanted to make, he chose the humble route. And although we don't have situations directly like this, right? But just in any situation, it's like, how can we humble ourselves regardless of what resources or abilities we think we have? How can we humble ourselves to not allow or create or feed into drama and silly arguments with people fighting over stuff, fighting over money, fighting over businesses, fighting over platforms or whatever, and just being and allowing God to lead us in whatever it is that he has for us, whatever it is that we need to be doing, right? And not fighting with somebody over something. You know what I mean? Because the thing is, just because something look good, just because it looked like you want to open up, just because it looked like you getting the better of the choice, especially if you choose something thinking that kind of getting over on somebody and something like that. You don't know what's in store beyond that. You don't know what's in store, from that decision. So that's why I believe that humility and just allowing the Lord to lead in everything is super important, whether it's with family or whoever. Just having a humble heart and a humble spirit, regardless of how established you think you are, regardless of how educated you are. I don't care how many degrees you got. I don't care how much money you make a year, what kind of car you drive, what kind of house you stay in, what type of clothes you wear or whatever. You know what I'm saying? How many followers you got or anything like that. I think it's important to stay humble and not get beside yourself, not, just think of yourself as higher than you are. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? That's what I take from that. All right, so chapter 14, Genesis chapter 14 is basically Lot get caught up in the drama of what's going on in Sodom. Now, he did not know this before choosing to go in this direction, but basically chapter 14 starts out with talking about the kings of these areas, basically, or the kings of, so let me just read it. In those days, Amraphel, I think that's how you say it, these names, Amraphel, king of Shinar, Arioch, king of Elasar, Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, and Tidal, king of Goim. I just know it's 4 kings, okay? Whatever their names are. Waged war against Bera, king of Sodom, Bersha, king of Gomorrah, Shinab, king of Admah, and Shimabar, king of Zeboim, as well as a king of Bela, that is Zor. Okay, so basically 4 kings waged war against the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah. And so after some time, I believe after about 14 years had passed by, they ended up going into battle. A lot of people were casualties of this battle that happened in Sodom and Gomorrah, right? So it says down to verse 11, this is after the battle happened, all of those things. Verse 11, it says the 4 kings were the 4 men, the 4 ones that we started off with that I know how to pronounce their names, but the 4 kings took all of the goods of Sodom and Gomorrah. So they stole all of the goods from Sodom and Gomorrah, and then they also stole Lot's possessions, because he was living in Sodom at the time too. So they basically waged war, stole everything, and also took Lot's stuff. Now there was one of the survivors, one of the people who were able to survive and make it out of this battle. They went and told Abram about what happened, right? And so once Abram found out, he basically gathered up his people and went to Sodom to bring back to get the goods back, and also to bring Lot back, right? So after Abram basically defeated the kings, was able to recover the stolen possessions and recover Lot as well and bring Lot back, King Melchizedek, who was a king of Salem, he ended up blessing Abram. So verse 18, it says, then Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. He was a priest to God Most High. He blessed him and said, he blessed him, meaning Abram. Melchizedek blessed Abram, saying, Abram is blessed by God Most High, creator of heaven and earth. And I give praise to God Most High, who has handed over your enemies to you. And then it says, and Abram gave him 1/10 of everything. Then it says, verse 21, then it says, the king of Sodom said to Abram, give me your people, but take the possessions for yourself. But Abram said to the king of Sodom, I have raised my hand in an oath to Yahweh, God Most High, creator of heaven and earth, that I will not take a thread or sandal strap or anything that belongs to you, so you can never say, I made Abram rich. I will not take nothing except for the servants that have eaten. But as for the share of the men who came with me, they can take their share. And that's how chapter 14 ends. So basically, the king of Sodom, so the king Melchizedek blessed Abram. and saw how God blessed Abram and favored Abram and allowed Abram to have victory um, over the men of Sodom. But the king of Sodom, as you can see, tried to basically bribe Abram and was like, okay, well, hey, give me your people and you can keep everything else. And Abram was like, no, I made an oath, I made a covenant, I made a vow, I made a promise to God that I will not take anything from you because I don't want you holding nothing over my head. I don't want you being able to say, well, you did this for me, you did that for me, or that I'm only, you put me on basically, or I'm only rich, or I'm only wealthy, or I'm only on top because of what you gave me. You know how people try to do that. And so he's like, I'm not going to take nothing from you. I'm going to, the only people that I'm going to take is I will take nothing except what the servants have eaten, right? But as for the share of the men who came with me, they can take their share, right? So Abram is a very fair man. It seems like Abram is he's a man of integrity. He's a man of good character. And at this point, he's honest with he's honest in every part of the situation, right? He's not trying to steal. He's not trying to undercut. He's not trying to do nothing slight-handed. And I know it's like, well, just in the other chapters, he just lied about Sarai being his wife, so maybe he's not that honest, but in that time, he was trying to protect himself, right? He knew how the men were, and so basically he was trying to cover himself and his family to keep them out of danger. Unfortunately, that backfired. But I believe at this point we can see that Abram is a man of humility and a man of good character, and he's keeping his word, he's keeping his vow, and he's keeping his promise to God to not take nothing from this man, because he knows that the man is evil-hearted and not pure-hearted, and he also don't want the man to be able to take the credit for anything that God does to and for Abram. So that's chapter 14. What I believe the takeaway from that is a couple things. We still see Abram's love and his loyalty to his nephew Lot, because as soon as Abram got word that Lot had been basically, I don't know if he was held captive, but his items were stolen and things like that, like Lot was basically in trouble, Abram was like, let's say less. We out here. He gathered up his people and they went. And he was able to, do whatever he needed to do. I don't know if he knocked a few men out, killed a few men, whatever the thing was. He went over there and basically he was able to get Lot and recover everything that was stolen from Lot. So Abram was loyal to his people who he was with, right? His nephew Lot. And I think that's important because obviously, no, we should not go out fighting people and all of those things. But I'm just thinking about the fact or the reason why Lot chose the eastern part of the land, because of what looked good, right? I believe that Lot thought that he was getting the better of the deal, right? And I believe Abram knew that. That's just me. I don't know. I believe Abram knew that, but he wasn't tripping. Like, he didn't care. He wasn't fazed. Right? So I believe that Abram's loyalty, right, and his promises to God and the covenants that he was holding on to from God allowed Abram to be loyal even in a situation where he didn't even really have to look out for him for real. Like, he didn't have to go look out for Lot, but he did. That's his nephew. And not only that, he gathered his people, and his people rode with him, right? So, Abram rescued Lot from a situation that honestly Lot kind of maybe got himself into, because Lot is the one that chose to go there in the first place, right? So that, and then also when the king of Sodom tried to bribe Lot, and like, hey, you give me this, I'm gonna give you that, I'm gonna put you on, you're gonna be good, basically. And Lot is like, Abram is like, no, excuse me, when the king of Sodom tried to bribe Abram, I think I said a lot. If I did, I'm sorry. When the king of Sodom tried to bribe Abram, Abram, first he remembered his promise to God. He remembered his promise to God. And I think that's so important, because how many times do we, say, okay, God, I ain't gonna do this. Okay, God, I ain't gonna do this some more. God, if you get me out, I ain't gonna, whatever. And then what happened? And I know this ain't the same situation, but he immediately, Abram's first response to the king of Sodom was, I have raised my hand in an oath to God that I will not take anything that belongs to you, right? So Abram remembered his vow to God, and he stood on that. And then, he said, because, you won't be able to say that I made Abram rich. You will not be able to take God's glory. And I don't think that he was saying that in a prideful way, as in, well, because I don't want you holding nothing over my head, because you ain't finna say that you made me, because then I'm gonna have to expose you, blah blah blah. Like, it wasn't nothing like that. I believe that Abram's motive in saying that was because he knows that his blessings and his provision and his all of the resources and the status of wealth that he has is a blessing from God. God has promised to give him this life of descendants and everything that he has, right? So I believe that Abram was careful to not want the glory of God to be taken, stolen, coveted, or anything like that. And so my takeaway is to don't let the glory of God be stolen by anything, even yourself. Just like you expect, just like when God makes promises to us, especially through his word, or just in your time of prayer, fellowship, meditation with him and things like that, we stand on the promises of God. How many of you can say that God can stand on your promises to him? That would be the question that I think arises from chapter 14 that we could really take and really sit with and, evaluate your own loyalty to God. And how do you make sure that God gets the glory out of everything in your life? And you don't base it on your own doings. You don't base it on anybody else putting you on or anything like that. And you are able to discern when somebody's motives are not right, when they are trying to steal the glory of God, right? So that's kind of what I take away from chapter 14. All right. And then chapter 15 is about the Abrahamic covenant. So it starts out by saying that after these events, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision, saying, "Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield. Your reward will be great." Then Abram responded basically like, "Lord, what can you give me? Because I don't have no kids yet." And so it says, verses 2, it says, "Lord God, what can you give me since I am childless and the heir of my house is Eliezer of Damascus?" Abram continued, "Look, you have given me no offspring, so a slave born in my house will be my heir." So basically he's saying to God, how can you bless me? I don't even have no kids yet. I don't have anything yet. So basically, the only thing that I have to continue my legacy is this slave in my house. So then the word of the Lord responded basically in the vision that this will not be your heir. Instead, one who comes from your own body will be your heir. So this will not be your heir. You will have a child that comes from you. So then he took him outside and said, "Look at the stars and count the stars. If you're able to count them, then you'll be able to count your offspring." But we know that you aren't able to even count the stars when the sky is full of stars. So I'm imagining it wasn't just 1 or 2 or 3 stars in the sky at that time. But it literally says he took him outside and said, "Look at the sky and count the stars if you are able to count them." If you are able to count them. Then it says, "Your offspring will be that numerous." And then Abram believed the Lord and he credited to him as righteousness, right? So then God is continuing to speak to Abram, and he's just, speaking other promises and basically affirming Abram. And then verse 8, he says, "Lord God, how can I?" So let me go back. Verse 7, let me just read the verse. He also said to him, God also said to Abram, "I am Yahweh who brought you from Ur of the Chaldeans to give you this land to possess." So basically he's saying, I am the God who brought you out of this in order to give you this land. This land will be yours. And Abram is responding, well, how can I know that I'll actually get the land? So I believe that Abram in that moment is basically asking for a sign. Like, how would I know that I'm actually going to get the land? Like, how will this happen, pretty much? And God told him, "Hey, bring me a 3-year-old cow, a 3-year-old female goat, a 3-year-old ram, a turtle dove, and a young pigeon." So Abraham got all of those. He split them down the middle, laid them, next to each other, however he did it. But he didn't cut up the birds. And I think that was a question I saw somewhere. Why didn't Abram cut up the birds? And I'll answer that in a second from my research. well, from a couple of the commentaries that I found, because really, I don't know if I really found a clear answer as to why, but I'll share with you the couple things that I did find. So actually, let me do that right now. Well, let me just finish this. So, and it says, you know, the birds of prey came down on the carcasses, but Abram drove them away. Birds of prey are basically birds of prey are demonic birds that came down on the carcasses, which is the dead animals that Abram just cut up. But Abram drove them away, and it says, as the sun was setting, a deep sleep fell on Abram. And suddenly a great terror and darkness descended on him. And then the Lord spoke to him and said, you know, know this for certain, that your offspring will be foreigners in a land that does not belong to them. They will be enslaved and oppressed for 400 years. However, I will judge the nation they serve, and afterwards they will go out with many possessions. So he's basically letting Abram know, some of your offspring, they're going to be enslaved. They're going to be slaves for 400 years, right? But throughout that time, I'm going to, after that's all said and done, I'm going to judge the land that enslaved them, right? And they are going to come out with many possessions, right? They're going to come out of this strong and have basically more than what they came in with. But you will go to your fathers in peace and be buried at a ripe old age. And so then it says, in the fourth generation, they will return here, for the iniquity of the Amorites has not yet reached its full measure. And it says, in the sunset, there was a dark smoking fire pot, and a flaming torch appeared and passed between the divided animals. On that day, the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, I give this land to your offspring, from the brook of Egypt to the Euphrates River, to the land of Kenites, and some other names. You can read it. Verse 18 and 19. So basically in this chapter, God gives Abram the promise that, you know, again, I'm going to give you many, many descendants, more than what you can even count. Abram believed that, but when God told Abram, I'm going to give you this land to possess, he's like, well, how is that going to happen? So God basically told him, hey, bring these animals, sacrifice them. Why didn't Abram cut the birds in half? That's a question. To be honest with you, I don't know. There's a couple things that I came across, two differing answers, honestly. So one commentary that I came across was basically saying that Abraham chose not to sacrifice that bird, and that is why God put Abram into a deep sleep. And the enslaved people was basically a punishment for Abram's lack of sacrifice. That's what I saw. I'm not sure how I feel about that. Another, I'm going to say how I feel about that, but I'm not sure what I believe about that. And then another reference or commentary that I came across was that the birds represented purity, so they were not to be cut, right? And so him going into a deep sleep in the slavery for 400 years was not necessarily a punishment. It was just a prophecy, and it was just a sign of what God was going to do, how things were going to happen, and how he was going to bring people out of it so that his covenant could come full circle with Abram. So I don't know. You could do your own research, look it up, Google it, and see what God shows you about it. I don't know why he didn't cut the birds, to be honest with you. I don't know. So Lord, if that's something that you need me to know, please reveal it to me. And maybe I'll come back if I get something different with just clarifying that or giving more information on that. But for right now, I don't know. But it, you know, to me, it don't change my faith or anything like that. So, you know, I'm okay. I'm okay not necessarily having that specific answer right now. Like I said, if it's something I need to know or something, you know, that really means something or whatever, then I believe that the Lord will reveal it to me, but I don't know. So that's that. And then, was there another question about this chapter? I think there was a question I saw in the group. Oh, I think that was a question I saw. Why is God punishing Abram? I don't know. Now, this is just me personally. Well, this is just me personally. Hold on. If God is punishing Abram, then I believe that it could possibly be due to just the sin, just the nature of sin and the consequence of his sin. I don't believe that I don't believe that God is punishing Abram, but he is letting him know that his offspring will experience this, these years of enslavement, right? And I don't know if that's a direct punishment towards Abram, as opposed to just a consequence of a sinful nature that the world is now in at this point. You know what I'm saying? So that's what I get from that. That's me. I could be way off. Maybe it is a punishment to Abram for maybe what could have been interpreted as his lack of belief about the children and about possessing the land. Maybe it was a punishment for not cutting up the birds. I don't know, but I personally believe that it wasn't a direct punishment towards Abram or a consequence of something that he did or didn't do, but just a matter of, like I said, just a matter of the sin in the world, period. And now a generation or a group or a nation of people are going to have to go through something. God is going to eventually bring them out, but this is just going to be a sign of God's work at hand, even in what would seem like a bad situation for 400 years. So that's my take on that. So overall, my takeaway from chapter 15 is to trust God with the promises of your life, right? And how do you know what the promises of God are? You know it through his word. That's why you have to be in his word. The more you are in his word, the more you are in the word of God, the more you will know the voice of God. The more you will know what God sounds like. The more you will know how God speaks to you, right? So, trust in the promises of God based on his word, and also just as you learn the voice of God as he speaks to you in, prayer time and things like that, or whatever, just being able to stand on the promises of God. But Abram is full of faith as he was, right? And as obedient as he seemed to be at times. He still questioned. He's like, well, how are you going to bless me? I still don't have kids, I don't have a child. I'm basically just going to have to use a servant that we have in our house to be my heir because you haven't given me any kids yet. And, he was willing to just use what he felt he had instead of standing on what God already told him. Because it's not the first time that God told him about having descendants more than what he would be able to count, right? So, and I believe that God knows, and I believe that God respected Abram's humanity, right? I believe that God respected Abram's humanity and didn't necessarily punish him for that, because if that's the case, if God was punishing Abram for questioning, well, how am I going to do this and I don't have kids yet, then God would not have led him outside and say, hey, well, count these stars. If as many as stars is up here, your children are going to be that numerous, right? He wouldn't have done that. He would have just said, well, look, since you're doubting me, you're not going to have no kids. I take back my covenant. He didn't say that, so I don't know. But so I believe that God understands humanity, right? And I don't think that there's anything wrong with asking God questions. There's a difference between questioning God and basically doubting God or accusing God of lying, and asking God questions, right? And so if God hasn't done anything to, to not stand by his word, if he haven't lied to you, he ain't cheated on you, he ain't did nothing for you to not trust him, then you don't necessarily have a reason to question him. But I think it's okay to ask him questions if you don't understand something, or if you're just wondering how something will work out of humility or something like that. That's my personal belief, but it all boils down to trusting God, right? Trusting him to know that what he said will come to pass. What he said will happen. What he said is the final authority, right? God is a man and he cannot lie, and he will not lie. It's our responsibility to do what he says, you know, and do as he leads and do as he instructs, because that's what helps, you know, bring the promise to pass in due time, you know, in time. But yeah, so yeah, I was gonna say something else, but that's my takeaway. Trust God, regardless of how what's the word, impossible it seems, right? We kind of talked about that on the call last week about impossible. Regardless of how impossible it seems, regardless of how unrealistic it might seem based on how you view the situation right now, if God said it, he meant it. And now these are promises that came from God. Sometimes we be taking just our desires and what we want and what we see somebody else with, and then we try to force God to promise us those things, or we those are self-imposed promises or whatever, and then we get mad when it didn't happen, when that might not have been God's will in the first place, or that might not have been the timing, that if God, you know, if that is something that God wants for your life, it might not have been the time or the place for it to happen, but because you wanted it right then and there, because you, whatever the situation is, now you're blaming God because it didn't happen, and now you feel that God is a, you know, not honest or a liar or didn't come through or whatever. So you really have to check your motive, and you really want to work and pray to get to a place where, and I understand that everybody is in different places, and you know, it don't matter how long you've been saved, it don't matter how much you think you know the Bible or whatever, we can never get to a place where we are too mature and know too much to where we don't need to pray and rely on God for clarity, for strength, for humility, for instructions, for whatever. So, you know, you should constantly and always pray, you know, God, I want to make sure that I'm making the right decision. Let me know, you know, let me hear your voice properly. Let me hear your voice clearly. You know, let me be able to discern and separate your voice from any other voice, including my own, you know, whatever the prayers are. But I think you should always be in a place where you are making sure and asking God to allow you to hear his voice and his alone, you know, however he needs to speak that to you. Does that make sense? That's pretty much my takeaway from that, and just the grace of God. Like I said, I don't believe that God got upset with Abram because he asked about the children or about the land. God reaffirmed his promise, and you know, put Abram. Sometimes I do believe that, because we see previously, even in the garden with Adam, where God put Adam to sleep in order to make the woman out of his rib. Sometimes God has to get you in a place to where you're not able to overthink, right? You're not able to, because sometimes I think if God tries to tell you something, or God tries to do something with you where you are able to be super hands-on, or it's just like right there, you're gonna overthink, or you're gonna try to, you just gonna, you know, I don't what's the word? There's a word I'm looking for, but you know what I'm saying. You know what I'm saying. If you don't, I don't know. I think you know what I'm saying. You know what I'm saying? But I think God had to get Abram to a place where he put him to sleep, or he allowed him to fall into a deep sleep, so that he can speak to Abram in a dream. So that way Abram was almost like fully submitted to where he couldn't necessarily argue back. He was in a space where he had to listen to God. You know what I mean? Hopefully that makes sense. So yeah. So that's the overview of chapter 15. And that is the recap and kind of the overview of Genesis chapters 13, 14, and 15, and just kind of giving a rundown of what they were about, and just some takeaways here and there. So I would love to hear your takeaways, your perspectives. If you do have any questions, feel free to comment them. And next video will be week 1, day 5, which is chapters 16, 17, and 18 will be the next video. So feel free, please like this video, subscribe if you have not already to this channel, and see y'all in the next video.